The penthouse went silent. Not because someone screamed, not because glass shattered, but because the impossible happened. In the center of the marble living room, beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than most people's homes, Seoyeon Kang, the boss's elegant wife, raised her hand to strike another maid, just like she had done countless times before. The guards by the elevator froze. The kitchen staff stopped moving. Even the head butler held his breath. They all knew what came next. Seoyeon always left marks when she was angry, and today she was furious. But then a hand caught her wrist. Not gently, not timidly, but firm as steel. It was the new girl, Maya Collins, the quiet black American maid who had arrived only 3 days ago. The girl nobody expected to even make eye contact, let alone grab the boss's wife in front of everyone. Maya held Seoyeon's raised hand, refusing to let it fall. Every worker gasped. Seoyeon's eyes went wide with shock and rage. "What do you think you're doing?" Seoyeon hissed in her sharp accent, her voice shaking with disbelief. But Maya didn't let go. Her grip stayed strong, her brown eyes stayed calm. And then, unknown to everyone, the man himself, Jinwoo Kang, stepped out from the hallway. He had been in his office taking a call with his underboss about a shipment coming in from Busan. He heard the commotion and turned his head slowly. His wife trying to slap a maid, and the maid stopping her. Jinwoo didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched, his jaw tight, because something inside him finally cracked open. The truth he had been avoiding for 2 years was standing right in front of him. Seoyeon tried to yank her hand free. "Let go of me," she shouted. "Let go now." But Maya's hand didn't move. That single moment changed everything. Because just as Seoyeon's face turned red with humiliation, someone else entered the penthouse. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone whose presence made Seoyeon's breath catch in her throat. But before we understand who it was, we have to go back 3 weeks. Because everything that happened in that living room began long before Maya ever stepped into the Kang penthouse. And it started with something Maya noticed on her very first day, something that should have warned her to run. Besties, before we continue, let me ask you a question. Have you subscribed to our channel? If not, please do so to help this channel build a strong community, and tell us where you are watching from in the comments section. Maya had arrived on a Monday morning, her small suitcase in hand, her heart full of hope. She needed this job desperately. Her grandmother back in Detroit was sick, her younger brother was struggling to stay in school, and this position paid 3 times what she could make anywhere else. The agency had been clear. The Kangs were wealthy, private, and demanding, but they paid well and on time. That was all Maya needed to know. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, an older Chinese woman with kind eyes, led her through the penthouse. It was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The furniture was all imported, the art on the walls worth millions. Everything gleamed like it had never been touched. "Mrs. Kang is very particular," Mrs. Chen said quietly as they walked. "She likes things done a certain way. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact unless necessary. And if she gets upset, just apologize and move on." Maya nodded, taking mental notes. Sounds strict but manageable. Mrs. Chen stopped walking and turned to face her. Her expression shifted, something darker crossing her features. "Maya," she said softly, "if Mrs. Kang ever raises her hand to you, just let her." Maya blinked. "Excuse me." Mrs. Chen glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "She has a temper. She hits when she's angry. We all just endure it. The pay is too good to walk away from." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "You're telling me to let someone hit me?" Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with regret. "I'm telling you to survive. The last 3 maids who fought back were fired on the spot with no references. One of them had a child to feed. She couldn't find work for months." Maya wanted to argue, wanted to say she wouldn't tolerate that, but she thought about her grandmother's hospital bills, her brother's tuition. She swallowed her pride and nodded. "I understand." But deep inside, she made herself a promise. If anyone tried to hit her, she wouldn't just stand there. She couldn't. Her grandmother had raised her better than that. That first day passed quietly. Maya kept her head down, cleaned the guest rooms, served lunch without incident. She saw Mrs. Kang only once, a tall, elegant woman with sharp features and cold eyes, dressed in a cream Chanel suit. She didn't acknowledge Maya's existence. She simply walked past her like she was furniture. But on the second day, Maya saw the truth. She was polishing the silver in the dining room when she heard shouting from the kitchen. A young Filipina maid named Teresa had accidentally spilled soup while preparing lunch. Sioyon appeared in the doorway, her face twisted with rage. "You stupid girl," Sioyon screamed. "Do you know how much that carpet costs?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Kang," Teresa stammered, falling to her knees to clean it up. "I'm so sorry." Sorry doesn't fix anything." Then Sioyon slapped her, hard. The sound echoed through the kitchen. Teresa's head snapped to the side, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't cry out. She just kept cleaning, kept apologizing, kept her eyes down. The other staff pretended not to notice. They kept chopping vegetables, kept stirring pots, kept moving like nothing had happened. Maya stood frozen in the dining room, her hands gripping the silver tray so hard her knuckles turned white. She wanted to run in there, wanted to say something, but Mrs. Chen caught her eye and shook her head slowly. "Don't," she mouthed. So Maya stayed silent. But that night, lying in her small room in the staff quarters, she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the slap, kept seeing Teresa's face, and she made another promise to herself. If it ever happened to her, she wouldn't just take it, no matter the cost. Everyone in New York knew about Jinwoo Kang. People whispered his name in the streets of Koreatown, in boardrooms in Manhattan, in backrooms where deals were made in cash and silence. He wasn't just wealthy. He controlled the flow of goods through half the ports on the East Coast. Luxury cars from Germany, electronics from South Korea, and shipments that customs never seemed to inspect too closely. He owned restaurants, nightclubs, real estate. On paper, he was a legitimate businessman. But everyone who mattered knew the truth. Jinwoo Kang was a boss. Not loud, not flashy, but powerful in the way that quiet men with sharp minds always are. He had connections that reached from Brooklyn to Busan, from the docks of New Jersey to the boardrooms of Seoul. He paid his debts, kept his word, and didn't forgive betrayal. People respected him not because they feared violence, though he was capable of it, but because he was fair. In a world of sharks, Jinwoo was the one who kept the waters calm. But his greatest mistake was the woman he married. Seoyeon Park had come from old money in Seoul. Her family had connections to politicians, chaebols, and old power structures that stretched back generations. She was beautiful, educated, fluent in 4 languages, and carried herself like royalty. When Jinwoo met her at a business dinner in Seoul 3 years ago, he was captivated. She seemed perfect, poised, intelligent, charming. She made him laugh, challenged him intellectually, and fit seamlessly into his world. They married within a year. She moved to New York, and for a while everything seemed fine. But what Jinwoo didn't know was that Seoyeon had always been good at wearing masks. In public, at galas and charity events, she was the ideal wife. She smiled, made polite conversation, donated to the right causes. But inside the penthouse, when no one important was watching, the mask came off. She screamed at workers in a mix of Korean and English. She threw dishes when meals weren't perfect. She slapped staff when they moved too slowly or looked at her the wrong way. And because Jinwoo was often in meetings, handling business, traveling between New York and Seoul, he never saw it. The staff were too afraid to tell him. They knew men like Jinwoo valued loyalty, and complaining about his wife felt like betrayal. So they endured. They took the abuse, cashed their checks, and said nothing, until Maya. On the 3rd day, everything exploded. It started with something small. Seoyeon couldn't find her jade bracelet, a family heirloom she wore constantly. It was worth over $50,000, but more than that, it was irreplaceable. She tore through the penthouse like a hurricane, shouting in Korean, throwing pillows. Slamming doors. The staff scattered like birds before a storm. "Who touched my things?" She screamed, her voice echoing off the marble floors. "Who took it?" No one answered. No one dared. She stormed into the main living room where the staff had gathered for the afternoon shift change. Her face was flushed with fury, her hands trembling. She shoved one maid hard enough to make her stumble backward into a side table. She slapped another across the shoulder, the sound sharp and brutal. "Useless, all of you, trash." The workers kept their heads down, eyes on the floor. Some were crying quietly. Others just stood there, numb, used to this. But then Seoyeon's eyes landed on Maya, the new girl, the one who didn't know her place yet. "You, new girl, come here." Maya stepped forward slowly, her face calm but her heart pounding. Yes, ma'am. Did you touch my bracelet? No, ma'am. Seo-yeon's face twisted. You lie, I see it in your face. You people always lie. The air went cold. Maya's jaw tightened. She felt every eye in the room on her. You people. The words hung there, ugly and sharp. Maya kept her voice steady. I didn't touch your bracelet, ma'am. You dare talk back to me. Before anyone could blink, Seo-yeon's hand shot up to slap her. The staff looked away, too afraid to watch. Teresa squeezed her eyes shut. Mrs. Chen turned her head, but the slap never landed. Because Maya's hand was already there, catching Seo-yeon's wrist mid-swing, firm, steady, unshaking. The entire penthouse froze. Seo-yeon's mouth fell open in shock. She tried to pull her hand free, but Maya's grip didn't budge. For the first time in 2 years, someone had said no to Seo-yeon Kang, and she couldn't believe it. That's when Jinwoo stepped into the room. He had been in the hallway on his way back from a call with his underboss. He heard the shouting and stopped. His dark eyes took in the scene. His wife hand trapped in a maid's grip, face red with shock and rage, the staff frozen in fear, and the new girl standing tall, refusing to be broken. Jinwoo didn't speak. He just watched. His mind was racing. He had heard whispers before, vague complaints from staff who left suddenly, rumors he had dismissed as exaggerations. But now, seeing this, he couldn't deny it anymore. This was real. This was who his wife became when he wasn't watching. Before anyone could move, the elevator doors opened behind him. A woman stepped out. Older, elegant, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes sharp as broken glass. She wore a black coat and carried herself like someone who had survived wars. The staff recognized her immediately. It was Madame Choi, Seo-yeon's mentor from Seoul. The woman who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident. The only person Seo-yeon had ever feared. Madame Choi had received an anonymous email 2 days ago. It contained photos. Seo-yeon shouting at staff, bruises on a maid's arm, a short video clip of her throwing a vase. The email had no return address, but the message was clear. Your student has not changed. Someone in the penthouse, someone loyal to decency, had finally reached out. So this is who you have become, Madame Choi said quietly in Korean, her voice soft but deadly. Seo-yeon's face drained of color. She finally yanked her hand free from Maya's grip and stepped back, her whole body trembling. Madame Choi, she whispered, what are you doing here? Madame Choi didn't smile. She switched to English so everyone could understand. I came because I heard rumors. I prayed they were lies, but now I see they were true. Seo-yeon's voice cracked. I was only trying to find my bracelet, this girl. Madame Choi raised a hand, silencing her. I saw everything from the hallway. Do not insult me with lies. The workers bowed their heads. Jinwoo folded his arms, his jaw tight, his mind replaying every time he had defended his wife to others, every time he had dismissed concerns as staff being too sensitive. He felt like a fool. You promised me you had changed, Madame Choi said. You promised me you would be different here in America. I am different, Seo-yeon said desperately. I'm trying, I swear. Trying, by hitting workers, by calling them trash, by embarrassing yourself in front of your husband. Jinwoo's eyes flickered. Seo-yeon looked at him, panic rising in her chest. She's just a maid, Seo-yeon said weakly, gesturing toward Maya. She disrespected me. She grabbed my hand. That statement hung in the air like poison. Jinwoo's voice came out low and cold, each word deliberate. No one in this house is just anything. Seo-yeon turned to him, her eyes wide. Jinwoo. Everyone here has a name, he said quietly, his tone cutting deeper than any shout. Everyone here works hard, and everyone here is owed respect. That includes you, he looked directly at Maya. The staff had never heard him speak like that. Seo-yeon opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She realized in that moment that she had miscalculated badly. She had assumed her husband would always take her side. She had assumed his loyalty was unconditional. She was wrong. Madame Choi stepped forward, her expression heavy with sorrow. Seo-yeon, she said softly, why didn't you tell him the truth about Seoul? Seo-yeon's entire body went rigid. Her eyes went wide with terror. No, not here, not now. Jinwoo frowned, his instincts sharpening. Tell me what. Madame Choi, please, Seo-yeon begged, her voice breaking. I'm begging you. But Madame Choi's voice was steady and sad. He deserves to know. They all do. The room held its breath. Maya felt her heart pounding in her chest. Mrs. Chen gripped the edge of a chair. Even the guards by the elevator shifted uncomfortably. Something terrible was about to be revealed. Madame Choi turned to Jinwoo. Mr. Kang, she said, before your wife came to America, there was an incident in Seoul. Seo-yeon covered her mouth with both hands, tears already forming. Jinwoo, please don't listen. She's confused. She's old. A young woman worked for her family, Madame Choi continued, ignoring the interruption. A housekeeper just like these women here. And one day, Seo-yeon accused her of stealing. Jinwoo's jaw clenched. His eyes never left his wife. Seo-yeon began to cry, shaking her head over and over. She humiliated the girl in front of the entire household, Madame Choi said. She beat her. And when the girl tried to run away, terrified and ashamed, she fell down the stairs. The workers gasped. Maya felt her stomach twist. Jinwoo stared at his wife in disbelief, his hands slowly clenching into fists. The girl didn't survive, Madame Choi finished quietly, her voice thick with grief. She died in the hospital 2 days later. Her name was Hae-jin Park. She was 22 years old. The silence was deafening. Seo-yeon collapsed to her knees on the marble floor, sobbing. I was young. I didn't mean to. I didn't know she would fall. Jinwoo took a step back, as if she had physically struck him. His voice came out in a strangled whisper. Is this true? Seo-yeon looked up at him through tears, her face destroyed. She nodded slowly. Yes. Jinwoo's world tilted. He thought of every moment he had defended her, every time he had introduced her as his perfect wife, every time he had trusted her word over whispers. How could you hide this from me? I was afraid you would leave me, she sobbed. You should have told me, he said, his voice breaking with anger and pain. You should have been honest. Seo-yeon crawled toward him on her knees, grabbing the hem of his jacket. Jinwoo, I love you. Please forgive me. I'm different now. I swear I've changed. But the staff who had been slapped, shoved, and cursed at knew she wasn't different. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maya looked at her and felt a strange mix of pity and disgust. Mrs. Chen wiped tears from her eyes. Teresa stared at the floor, her own trauma reflected in this revelation. Before Jinwoo could respond, the elevator doors opened again. This time, a man stepped out. He was younger, maybe late 20s, with a hard, weathered face and eyes that had seen too much grief. He wore a cheap jacket, worn jeans, and carried a small backpack. The guards moved toward him immediately, hands reaching for weapons, but he raised his hands slowly. I'm not here to fight, he said in accented English, his voice rough but controlled. I'm here for her. He pointed directly at Seo-yeon. Seo-yeon's eyes went wide with pure terror. She scrambled backward on the floor, shaking her head violently. No, it can't be. How did you find me? The man's voice was calm but filled with years of quiet rage. My name is June Park, and 6 years ago, your wife killed my sister. The room exploded into stunned silence. Seo-yeon screamed. The staff backed away instinctively. Jinwoo stepped in front of her without thinking, his hand moving automatically toward the gun he kept tucked in his waistband. But June didn't move. He just stood there, staring at Seo-yeon, with years of grief carved into every line of his face. I've been looking for you for a long time, he said. I finally found you. Seo-yeon sobbed uncontrollably. Jinwoo, please don't let him hurt me. Please. But June shook his head slowly. I'm not here to hurt you. I thought about it for years, dreamed about it, but that's not why I came. Then why are you here? Jinwoo asked, his voice hard, his body still positioned protectively despite everything he had just learned. June's eyes never left Seo-yeon. I'm here so you finally admit what you did. So the world knows who you really are. So my sister's name isn't forgotten. Jinwoo looked between them, his mind racing. Madame Choi stepped forward, her voice gentle. He deserves to speak, she said quietly to Jinwoo. You owe him that much. Jinwoo's hand slowly moved away from his weapon. He stepped aside. Seo-yeon curled into herself, shaking. June reached into his backpack slowly. The guards tensed again, but he only pulled out a folded photograph. He held it up carefully like it was made of glass. "My sister," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Her name was Jin. She was 22 years old. She loved singing. She used to hum old ballads while she folded laundry. She wanted to be a teacher someday. The staff began to cry quietly. Maya wiped her eyes, her throat tight. Mrs. Chen bowed her head in respect for the dead girl she had never met. "She called me the night before she died," June continued, his voice growing stronger. "She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said your wife accused her of stealing a necklace, that she hid her in front of all the other workers, that she called her a thief and a liar. My sister was so scared, so ashamed, she couldn't stop crying." Si Ho-yeon covered her face, her shoulders shaking violently. June's voice didn't waver. "The next morning, when your wife started shouting at her again, Jin ran. She was so terrified she wasn't thinking clearly. She tripped on the stairs. Her head hit the marble, and she never woke up." Jinwoo felt his chest tighten, his breathing shallow. He thought of his own mother, his own sister back in Seoul. He imagined them in that position. The thought made him sick. "The police said it was an accident," June said bitterly. "My family was poor. We had no power, no connections. The parks paid everyone off. The case disappeared. And your wife," he looked at Si Ho-yeon with hollow eyes, "she moved to America, married a rich man, and pretended it never happened." Si Ho-yeon looked up at Jinwoo, her face streaked with tears and snot. "I didn't push her. I swear on everything. She fell. It was an accident." "But you hit her," June said, his voice rising for the first time. "You humiliated her. You made her so afraid she couldn't think straight. You caused it." Si Ho-yeon couldn't answer. She had no defense left. Jinwoo stepped back from her completely, his face unreadable but his eyes cold. "I need to think," he said quietly. "Jinwoo, please," Si Ho-yeon begged, reaching for him. "Don't leave me. Don't abandon me." But he turned and walked toward the window, staring out at the city lights. His mind was a storm. Madame Choi stood silently, her heart heavy. June remained in the center of the room, still holding the photograph of his sister. And Si Ho-yeon knelt on the floor, finally and completely exposed. Then June spoke again, his voice steady. "I want justice," he said. "I want her to face what she did." Jinwoo turned slowly. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to let me take her to the police. The case was never officially closed. My family didn't have the resources to fight back then, but I do now. I have a lawyer. I have evidence. I have witnesses who were too scared to speak before but will speak now." Si Ho-yeon screamed, the sound raw and desperate. "No, Jinwoo, please. You can't let him do this. I'm your wife." Jinwoo looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, he truly saw the woman he had married. Not the polished wife who smiled at galas, not the quiet woman who poured his whiskey at night, but the cruel, broken person who hurt others to feel powerful. The person who had lied to him for years. The person who had let an innocent girl die and never looked back. "You have to face this," he said quietly. Si Ho-yeon's face crumbled completely. She collapsed onto the floor, her body racked with sobs. The staff watched in stunned, painful silence. Madame Choi wiped a single tear from her eye. June lowered the photograph gently, his shoulders finally relaxing after 6 years of carrying unbearable weight. Jinwoo walked over to Maya, who stood near the back of the room, still processing everything. "You did something today that no one else had the courage to do," he said softly. Maya shook her head. "I just didn't want to get hit, sir. That's all." Jinwoo almost smiled, but the sadness in his eyes was too heavy. "No, you stood up for yourself. You reminded me what strength actually looks like. And maybe," he glanced back at his sobbing wife, "you reminded me what I've been ignoring." Maya nodded, unsure what to say. Jinwoo turned back to June. "The police will be here soon. She'll go with them." Si Ho-yeon looked up at him, her face destroyed, her voice a broken whisper. "And us? What happens to us?" Jinwoo's voice was gentle but final. "There is no us anymore." She let out a sound so broken it hurt to hear. But slowly, through her tears, she nodded. "I understand." The police arrived 40 minutes later. They took statements from Madame Choi, from June, from several staff members who finally felt safe enough to speak. When they led Si Ho-yeon out in handcuffs, she didn't fight. She just looked back once at Jinwoo, her eyes filled with a regret that came 6 years too late. Jinwoo didn't look away, but he didn't follow her either. He just stood there, watching the woman he thought he knew disappear into the elevator. June stayed for a while, talking quietly with the detectives. Before he left, he approached Jinwoo. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Jinwoo shook his head. "Don't thank me. I should have seen it sooner." June's eyes softened just slightly. "You didn't know, but now you do. And you did the right thing, that matters." Then he turned to leave, but paused. He looked back one more time. "My sister used to say that good people exist everywhere, even in dark places. I stopped believing that after she died. But maybe," he looked around at the staff, at Maya, at Madame Choi, "maybe she was right." Then he left. The penthouse felt different after that, lighter somehow, quieter. The staff began to move again, slowly returning to their routines, but everything had shifted. There was a sense of release in the air, like a long-held breath finally let go. Madame Choi approached Jinwoo before she left. "You are a good man," she said in Korean. "I'm sorry you were hurt by someone I helped raise. That shame is mine to carry too." Jinwoo bowed slightly. "Take care of yourself, Madame Choi." She smiled sadly, touched his shoulder briefly, then walked to the elevator. The doors closed behind her, and Jinwoo was alone again with his thoughts. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jinwoo stood in the living room where everything had fallen apart. He thought about his choices, about the woman he had loved, about the lies that had built his life for the past 2 years. And despite the pain, despite the betrayal, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. The kind that comes from finally knowing the truth, no matter how ugly it is. Maya appeared beside him quietly, holding a tray with tea. "Sir, do you need anything?" Jinwoo looked at her, this young woman who had changed everything just by refusing to be broken. "No," he said, "but thank you. For today, for standing up." Maya smiled softly, setting the tea down. "My grandmother always told me, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything." Jinwoo nodded slowly. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She is. That's why I'm here, to take care of her." Jinwoo respected that more than she knew. Family loyalty was something he understood deeply. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was $10,000 in cash. "Take this," he said, "for your family." Maya's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, I can't." "You can, and you will. Consider it a thank you. And also," he added, "I'm raising everyone's salary. What happened here can never happen again. You all deserve better." Maya accepted the envelope with trembling hands, tears gathering in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Kang. Thank you so much." Jinwoo nodded, and Maya, he added as she turned to leave. "Yes, sir. You ever need anything, you come to me directly. Understood." She smiled, wiping her eyes. Understood. As she walked away, Jinwoo poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood by the window. The city stretched out before him. Millions of lights flickering in the growing darkness. His empire was still intact. His business would continue. But his personal life had been burned to the ground, and strangely, he was grateful for it. Because the lies were finally gone, the masks had fallen, and the truth, painful and raw as it was, had set him free. He thought about rebuilding, about finding someone real next time, someone honest. But for now, he just wanted to breathe. In the staff quarters, Maya sat on her bed, holding the envelope, tears streaming down her face. She thought about calling her grandmother, telling her the good news. She thought about her brother, how this money could change everything for them. And she thought about the girl in the photograph, Haijin, who never got to become a teacher, who never got to sing her ballads again. Maya whispered a quiet prayer for her, and then she wiped her tears, stood up, and walked to the window of her small room. The same city lights that Jinwoo saw stretched out before her too. Different views, different lives, but the same sky above them both. And for the first time since arriving in New York, Maya felt like she had done something that mattered. Not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told to stay silent, to accept abuse, to bow their head and take it. She had said no, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it had gotten a little bit better. The next morning, the staff gathered in the kitchen. Mrs. Chen made tea. Teresa brought out pastries, and for the first time in 2 years, they talked openly. They shared stories of the abuse they had endured. They cried together. They laughed in relief. And they made a pact. Never again would they protect someone's cruelty with their silence. Jinwoo heard them from his office. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, and he felt something shift in his chest. This was what a home should sound like, not silent fear, but honest voices. He had built an empire on loyalty and respect in the streets, but he had failed to demand it in his own house. That ended now. 3 weeks later, Seoyeon was formally charged. The case made headlines. Former staff members came forward with testimonies. Jun's lawyer built a strong case. And slowly, justice began to move forward, imperfect and complicated, but moving nonetheless. Jinwoo filed for divorce. He didn't attend the trial. He had said everything he needed to say the night she was arrested. He moved forward with his life, quieter now, more careful about who he let close. And Maya, she stayed. She worked hard, sent money home every month, and eventually brought her grandmother and brother to New York. Mrs. Chen became like a second mother to her. The staff became her family. And Jinwoo, in his own quiet way, made sure she was protected, respected, and valued. Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage can change everything. Sometimes, one person refusing to bow can break a cycle of cruelty that has lasted for years. And sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't just about you. It's about everyone who comes after you. Maya learned that the hard way, but she learned it, and she never forgot. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage doesn't always roar but sometimes just whispers, "I will not be broken," then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Because we tell stories here that matter, stories about real strength, real choices, and real consequences. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to stand up to someone powerful? What happened? Let's talk about it. And remember, you are not alone. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I'll see you in the next story. Stay strong.